Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here with us today. If you're someone who loves to really cut through the noise and understand exactly how the world around us is shaped, well, you're in the exact right place. Today, we are unpacking the chaotic, the high stakes, and honestly, the completely fascinating trajectory of the world's wealthiest individual, Elon Musk. We're going to map out exactly how a kid reading encyclopedias transformed into an unavoidable global force.
Just picture this for a second. On one hand, you have a solitary 12-year-old boy back in 1984 coding a video game entirely by himself in his room. Fast forward to today, and that exact same person is controlling reusable rockets, pioneering literal brain-computer interfaces, and commanding one of the world's absolute largest social media platforms. What you should really take away from this explainer is how that massive, almost unbelievable leap actually happened. Because, it wasn't magic. It was a series of incredibly risky, structured steps. Okay, let's dive right into this. Part 1, the bullied boy genius.
So, growing up in South Africa in the 1970s, Elon's brain essentially functioned like a supercomputer. He'd go into these deep, trance-like states, visualizing super complex ideas, to the point where his parents actually took him to doctors because they thought he was deaf. This hyper-logical brain just interacted with the world differently. Like, there's this story where a terrified young cousin told him she was afraid of the dark. Elon's comforting response: "Darkness is only the absence of light." I mean, it's entirely factual, sure, but not exactly what a scared kid wants to hear, right? This strict reliance on logic over emotion really alienated him. He was severely bullied, even to the point where a gang of students once threw him down a flight of stairs and hospitalized him. These deeply traumatic early years forced him into extreme isolation, but they also built a massive, almost unbreakable mental and physical resilience. He ended up channeling all that isolation directly into computers. At age 10, he gets his hands on a PC and a programming workbook. Now, this workbook was meant to take 6 months to finish. He works continuously, basically without sleep, and finishes the whole thing in 3 days. By age 12, he uses those skills to code a space shooter video game called Blaster, and he actually sold it to a company for $500. This is a really vital milestone for us to look at. It was his very first business, and it proved to him that his digital creations had actual, real-world monetary value. All right, let's move right along to our next chapter. Part 2, building the first millions. Realizing America was pretty much the only place that could match his ambition, he navigates his way to the US by way of Canada. He arrives right as the 1995 internet boom is kicking off, and he and his brother Kimball start Zip2, which was basically an online city directory. Elon codes day and night, while Kimball sells door-to-door, and the platform just explodes. By 1999, right at the absolute peak of the dot-com boom, Compaq swoops in and acquires it. At just 27 years old, Elon walks away with $22 million. Now, for like 99% of people, this is where the story ends. You take the money, you retire to an island. But for Elon, this was literally just seed capital. He immediately takes his new fortune and targets an industry notorious for being incredibly slow and resistant to change, the banking sector. He envisions a totally branchless online financial system called X.com to force rapid adoption in an era where people, remember, barely trusted online shopping. He literally gave away money. We're talking $20 sign-up bonuses and $10 referral fees. It was a massive cash burn, and it put him in a brutal marketing war with another startup called PayPal, run by Peter Thiel. Realizing they would totally destroy each other, the two companies wisely decided to merge. But here's the catch. Elon's ruthless management style, like expecting weeks of work to be done in mere hours, created intense friction. In a twist of pure irony, while he was away on his honeymoon in the year 2000, the board ousted him as CEO. Yet, because he remained the largest shareholder, when eBay acquired the company in 2002 for $1.5 billion, Elon netted a staggering $180 million. He was now officially one of Silicon Valley's most elite, successful entrepreneurs. Which brings us to part 3, the push for Mars. Right around this time of immense financial success, Elon suffered an unimaginable personal loss: the passing of his infant son at just 2.5 months old. Devastated, he threw himself entirely into his work. To cope with his grief, he looked away from software and up toward the stars. He asked himself a really simple question: why haven't humans explored Mars yet? He goes to NASA's website and, to his absolute shock, finds no concrete plans for Mars exploration. Realizing humanity's space ambition had stalled out, he decides to jumpstart it himself. He literally flies to Russia with a team to buy refurbished intercontinental ballistic missiles to use as launch vehicles.
Well, the Russians didn't exactly take him seriously. They quoted him an outrageous $21 million for just a single missile. On the flight home, while his team is sitting there in defeat, Elon is just calculating away on his laptop. He realizes the raw materials to build a rocket only account for 2 to 3% of the final price tag. The rest of the cost? That was just bad design and bloated manufacturing. Right then and there, he tells his team, "We'll build the rockets ourselves." And that was the birth of SpaceX. His strategy to completely revolutionize the aerospace industry was highly structured. First, he tore down the literal walls between design and manufacturing teams to reduce errors. Second, he utilized vertical integration, meaning instead of relying on slow, super expensive third-party suppliers, SpaceX just built their own engines, tanks, and components entirely in-house. And third, he used much cheaper consumer-grade components wherever safely possible, instead of those wildly overpriced aerospace-grade parts.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how audacious the disruption really was. The industry standard at the time to send a 600-kilogram payload into low Earth orbit was roughly $70 million. Elon promised to do it with his new Falcon 1 rocket for just $7 million. He was aiming to slash spaceflight costs by 90%. It was a beautiful, audacious plan, but executing it, that nearly destroyed him.
Let's slow down the pace a bit here, because we're entering part 4, the brink of bankruptcy. So by 2008, the global financial system is melting down, and Elon is watching both of his major investments, SpaceX and a scrappy electric car startup he heavily invested in called Tesla, collapse simultaneously. You know, space is incredibly unforgiving. Despite promising a launch within a year, it took SpaceX 4 agonizing years to get Falcon 1 to the pad in 2006, and it crashed after just 25 seconds. A year later, a second attempt crashes. In August 2008, a third attempt explodes midair. Through these devastating, highly public failures, Elon had burned through $100 million. SpaceX had just enough money and parts left for one final life-or-death launch. At the exact same time, Tesla is basically dying. The cost to manufacture their first electric car, the Roadster, had completely ballooned to $100,000 per vehicle, which is way more than they planned to even sell it for. The 2008 financial crisis scared away all the other investors. This is the absolute all-is-lost moment. Honestly, any logical business mind would have chosen one company to save and let the other die. Instead, Elon sells his personal McLaren sports car, drains his remaining personal assets, and bets every single last cent on both companies surviving. And then, we get the miracle of December 2008. The fourth Falcon 1 launch achieves perfect orbit, making SpaceX the first private company in history to ever do so. Just weeks later, a desperate NASA, needing a way to supply the International Space Station, swoops in and awards SpaceX a massive $1.6 billion contract. Meanwhile, Elon's frantic calls to investors finally pay off on Christmas Eve, securing $40 million to save Tesla, literally days before bankruptcy. He snatched both companies from the jaws of absolute ruin. Coming out of that fire brings us to part 5, changing the future. Surviving that 2008 crucible proved his methods worked under extreme pressure. He was no longer just surviving. He was ready to actively bend the future to his will. Tesla knew they couldn't just build expensive sports cars forever. They had to hit the mass market. Enter the Model S in 2012. It wasn't just an electric car. It was a fundamental paradigm shift. With a massive touchscreen, over-the-air software updates that literally improved the car overnight, and a 500-kilometer range, it was essentially a high-performance computer on wheels. It completely destroyed the stereotype of electric cars being these slow little golf carts and single-handedly forced the entire legacy auto industry to pivot toward clean energy. And the sheer scale of what followed is truly staggering. SpaceX revolutionized spaceflight again by landing and reusing Falcon 9 rocket boosters. They launched Starlink, beaming global internet from space. They're building Starship right now to actually colonize Mars. He launched The Boring Company to fix traffic, Neuralink to merge human brains with computers, acquired Twitter, now X, to shape global communication, and founded XAI. The boy who visualized science labs in his head, yeah, he's basically building them all across the planet now. Which leads us to the current reality, part 6, wealth, power, and controversy. An empire of this immense magnitude inevitably brings immense global influence. The financial result of these interconnected ventures is $400 billion. He is the richest person in the world, holding a net worth nearly double that of the second richest person on Earth. To put that into perspective, this level of wealth entirely transcends luxury. It represents an unprecedented, world-altering level of leverage. But of course, that leverage is sharply polarized. His management style, which is born from his own extreme work ethic, often leads to very intense employee pressure. His acquisition of Twitter resulted in massive layoffs, and his unfiltered social media presence regularly causes noticeable stock market volatility. Recently, he's also made roughly $280 million in political donations. It is a highly unique combination of capital and political influence that understandably draws immense public scrutiny. And that brings us to our final thought for today. Whether you view him as humanity's greatest visionary or a volatile tech baron, the undeniable reality is that the 12-year-old boy coding alone in his room willed his sci-fi dreams into existence, dragging entire industries kicking and screaming right into the 21st century. So I leave you with this. You may love him or you may completely hate him, but can you really afford to ignore the man who is actively building the future? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.